In exactly 38 seconds, one of America's most respected institutions crumbled before my eyes. I'm Jerome Powell, Chairman of the Federal Reserve, and what I witnessed in that chamber will haunt me forever. When Adam Schiff stood up, Pam Bondi's face went pale. Chuck Grassley's hands trembled. This wasn't just a Senate hearing. This was democracy collapsing in real time. What I saw shocked me to my core. As a central banker, I've sat through countless critical meetings, weathered financial crises, but nothing prepared me for this moment. Because that day, I watched congressional oversight, the backbone of American democracy, shatter right before my eyes. When Adam Schiff began speaking, his voice was calm, but every word carried fury. Pam Bondi's hearing crossed a dangerous line where legitimate questions were met with personal attacks. The room went silent. Watching from behind tables stacked with economic reports, I felt something break irreversibly. The details Schiff described terrified me. Troops rappelling from Black Hawk helicopters, military-style assaults on apartment buildings in major cities, children zip-tied, and worst of all, when the legal basis for these actions was questioned, Attorney General Pam Bondi's response was personal attacks. In my job at the Federal Reserve, every decision I make must be backed by solid legal and economic justification. When I change interest rates, implement quantitative easing, I account for every step to Congress, clear, transparent, accountable, because accountability is the foundation of democracy. But what Schiff described was something entirely different. Senator Whitehouse had asked where $50,000 went in an FBI undercover operation. A simple oversight question. Bondi's response? A personal attack on Whitehouse. Other senators sat stunned, glancing at each other in disbelief. The third example was even more disturbing. When asked about the legal basis for bombing ships in the Caribbean, reportedly the Justice Department had written an opinion justifying this action, the same reaction, personal attack, as if the questions were anticipated, the responses pre-written. Schiff's statement hit me hard. I wouldn't bother with attacks on me. I've grown accustomed to them. But if committee members can't ask serious questions and get serious answers, we can't do oversight. The chamber fell into dead silence. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Is American democracy cracking? From my experience, I know institutions depend on trust. The Federal Reserve's power comes from faith in our independence. Congress's power comes from its ability to demand answers. Both require transparent accountability. What Bondi did was like driving a dagger into the heart of this system. Schiff's most striking point was that he'd served a decade on the House Judiciary Committee and had never seen such behavior from a cabinet officer. This wasn't partisan criticism. This was eyewitness testimony to the collapse of norms that both parties had relied upon. Then came Chuck Grassley's response, revealing and terrifying at once. He didn't deny that decorum had collapsed. He didn't dispute that Democratic members were insulted. Instead, he explained that after the tension of a previous FBI director hearing, he essentially let the hearing run its course. That explanation shook me. Leadership kicks in when things get difficult, not when they're easy. Grassley was essentially saying he stopped enforcing rules because confronting a cabinet member from his own party was too uncomfortable. During economic crises, I've learned one thing. Panicked markets seek certainty more than leadership. What Grassley demonstrated was the opposite of certainty. The moment when rules become optional is when systems collapse. Schiff's final request was perfect. Answer the question, state why you refuse, but refrain from personal attacks on committee members. This was the minimum standard required for democratic oversight to function. What happened in that hearing directly contradicted everything I've experienced at the Fed. We explain the rationale for every decision. We share our data. We respond to criticism, because accountability is the price of wielding power. What Bondi did, meeting questions with personal attacks, stood in complete opposition to this system, and Grassley's tolerance of it accelerated the breakdown. Schiff's warning sent chills down my spine. If this becomes the template, we won't be able to do any oversight. This wasn't hyperbole, it was reality. Institutions fail not just when laws are broken, but when norms are abandoned. Sitting in that chamber, I realized this wasn't Adam Schiff versus Chuck Grassley. This was about whether hearings still serve truth-seeking or just political theater. Grassley's response, however candid, showed how easily accountability can be sidelined when decorum enforcement becomes optional. As Federal Reserve Chairman, I make decisions daily that affect millions of Americans' economic futures. I'm held accountable for those decisions, because that's how democracy works. Those who wield power must answer for it. What I witnessed in the Senate that day was the moment I saw this fundamental principle crumble, but there was more. The room's energy shifted when Schiff delivered his knockout blow. I spent a decade on the House Judiciary Committee. I never saw a hearing like this with a cabinet officer. If a Democratic cabinet officer personally attacked my Republican colleagues, I would call for it to stop. It would be disgraceful. That moment hit like lightning. Even the Republicans fidgeted in their seats. You could hear the unspoken question hanging in the air. Why didn't anyone stop this? Schiff continued with surgical precision. If troops were rappelling from helicopters in any city in your states, zip-tying children, you would want to know the legal basis, and so would I. The camera panned across Republican senators' faces. Some looked uncomfortable, others defiant, but none could deny the logic. I've seen this dynamic before in federal open market committee meetings when a member challenges a weak argument. The room recognizes truth when it's spoken plainly. That's what happened when Schiff laid out the facts without partisan rhetoric. But then came the moment that changed everything. Schiff looked directly at Grassley and said something that sent shockwaves through the chamber. Mr. Chairman, I'm grateful to be on this committee. I appreciate every interaction with you. You've always been eminently fair. If I didn't think you were of that character, I wouldn't even raise this. The political calculus was brilliant. Schiff wasn't attacking Grassley. He was appealing to his better angels. He was saying, I know you're better than this. Help me restore order. In my years dealing with financial markets, I've learned that sometimes the most powerful move is trusting someone to do the right thing. Grassley's response revealed the depth of institutional breakdown. I thought I set the decorum when I said both sides should treat each other with respect, he admitted. I even told Patel if he didn't get a chance to answer, I'd give him time to respond. But then came the devastating admission, you know how that meeting turned out. The subtext was clear. The previous hearing with FBI Director Patel had been so chaotic that Grassley essentially gave up trying to control future hearings. This wasn't leadership. This was surrender. As someone who's navigated the 2008 financial crisis, the COVID-19 economic collapse, and countless market volatility episodes, I understand the temptation to let chaos run its course. But that's exactly when leadership matters most. When markets panic, the Fed steps in with decisive action. We don't throw up our hands and hope for the best. Grassley's next words chilled me. After seeing how senators handled the FBI director, I felt just let the show go on the way senators wanted it to go on. He admitted that decorum enforcement had become optional. In my world, that would be like saying we'll stop regulating banks when times get tough. The most damning part was Grassley's justification. I don't appreciate the insults that went to Democratic members, particularly where they were wrong, but after seeing how senators handled the FBI director, I guess I felt that just let the show go on. Translation: I knew it was wrong, but I was too tired to fight it. That's not governance, that's abdication. Schiff had predicted exactly this outcome. If this becomes the template for future hearings, we won't be able to do any oversight and things will just degenerate. Grassley's response proved him right. I thought about my own confirmation hearings, where senators grilled me for hours about monetary policy. Tough questions, yes, hostile questions sometimes, but always within the bounds of seeking information, not scoring points through personal destruction. What Bondi did was different. She weaponized the witness chair, turning what should have been accountability into combat. And leadership allowed it, because stopping it would have required courage. The final moment that haunts me was when Grassley adjourned the meeting abruptly. Some of the people on your side of the aisle were screaming and yelling, meeting adjourned. No resolution, no commitment to change, just escape. In Federal Reserve meetings, we don't adjourn when discussions get heated. We work through disagreements because the stakes, America's economic future, are too important. What I saw that day was leadership choosing expedience over responsibility. As I left that chamber, I realized I hadn't just witnessed a bad hearing. I had witnessed the template for how democracy dies, not with dramatic coups, but with the quiet abandonment of standards, one meeting at a time. Later that evening, back in my office at the Federal Reserve, I found myself staring at the portraits of my predecessors, Paul Volcker, Alan Greenspan, Ben Bernanke, Janet Yellen. Each had faced their own crises, their own moments when institutional integrity was tested. But they had operated in an America where basic norms held, where accountability was expected, not optional. I picked up my secure phone and called an old colleague from Treasury. "Did you watch the hearing?" I asked. The pause on the other end told me everything. "Jerome," he finally said, What happens to us when oversight becomes performance art? That question haunted me, because at the Fed we depend on congressional oversight to maintain our democratic legitimacy. We testify, we explain our decisions, we submit to questioning, sometimes hostile questioning, because that's how the system works. Without that check, we become just another power center answerable to no one. I thought about the ripple effects. If cabinet officers can simply attack lawmakers instead of answering questions, what happens to Fed accountability? Will future Fed chairs face the same treatment when explaining monetary policy? Will senators start demanding personal loyalty instead of transparent governance? The phone rang, a reporter seeking comment on the hearing. I declined, as always, but the question lingered. How long before the erosion reached us? And I'll never forget it.